and welcome to our program. I'm your host, Nicole Hayles. This evening, we will be discussing the People's National Party Manifesto and more battleground constituency seats. Joining me in this evening's discussion is political analyst and acting director of institutional research at Northern Caribbean University, Paul Bourne. Also joining us is Vice President of the People's National Party, Damon Crawford. We will also hear from the Jamaica Labour Party's candidate for South St. James, Homer Davis. Good evening, gentlemen, and thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Crawford, given the rise in COVID-19 cases in recent weeks, what plans in the PNP Manifesto outlines how the party will deal with the ongoing pandemic if it forms the next government?
Well, the People's National Party has within its manifesto a COVID health management plan and a COVID economic re-engineering plan. I speak to the COVID health management plan first because we think that there's been a multiplicity of mistakes made by the government, which was living mostly on luck more than on efficiency. I'll give you some examples that when the 5,000 persons were allowed into the country without having taken record of their contact, then having to come on television to ask them to return, it was luck that 500 of those didn't have COVID. Equally, when we shut down the St. Catherine with the 2-day shopping, causing for a concentration of persons trying to get food, it was luck that we didn't have 10% of those persons having COVID. It additionally came to pass that when Alarica had the outbreak, they had passed the government's test as it relates to their health protocols. It was luck that other entities didn't have that situation. And so what we have seen is an inefficient ring fencing. What we have seen is an inefficient proposal or marketing of mask wearing. And what we have seen as well is an inefficient testing methodology with over 10,000 tests in backlog. And so those inefficiencies will be corrected by the People's National Party. We have also seen where there's no cough clinic, which means that I can go to any clinic with a broken leg and come back with COVID because person seeking healthcare goes to the clinic. There's no instruction as it relates to which clinic those persons should head to or which clinic are the person without cough symptom should not go. So the PNP would definitely have those things corrected.
Paul, I want to bring you in here. You just heard of some of the things that Mr. Crawford just mentioned. What part of those plans do you think would work and what would not work for the Jamaican people?
I'm not sure, but what I do know, I'm wondering what cost structure is this going to be, and maybe what I should ask Damian is how will they afford to correct a number of these things? Where the cash will be coming from, Damian, to do this?
Well, most of these things are not very expensive. In fact, we have seen where marketing was given an $89 million to do marketing. This marketing was concentrated more on the minister than the people and the people's movement. So when you look, for example, at changing just the process of having your phone being a geofencing, that you can separate yourself from the phone, it was idiotic in the first place to perceive that that could work. You would need more the bangle. Yeah, which is not very expensive, and persons may have to pay for that. Equally, testing at the airport doesn't mean that the country have to pay for those testing. In fact, the person willing or wishing to enter through the borders may be charged for these tests. So it is not a matter that the public will have to stand all the expenses, because especially at the borders, persons who are volunteering to enter would have to pay for the activities that they must do to enter.
Mr. Crawford, let's still on the manifesto. The rent-to-own program is among the several initiatives that the party is proposing under housing. Could you break down the rent-to-own program for us?
Well, first, let me just highlight that housing construction is a part of the COVID economic re-engineering or COVID economic management program, because having had a fallout in tourism, then you have to find other industries that will do high labor consumption and that will do high activities within our society. And so therefore we are looking to build 130,000 homes in the next 5 years. That needs three things. It needs one, the supply, it needs two, the demand, and it needs the competence, the capacity to build those homes. We have within the manifesto the construction squad that will be developing for the capacity to construct these houses, but also We're looking at persons who are private sector construction persons who used to do these Airbnb apartments, who used to do these $30 million apartments. We expect the demand for those to be less. And so NHT and the PNP government will galvanize these private investors also with some inducements to go into the smaller affordable homes market. And therefore, what we are saying is that the supply side will be improved by having the rent to own. The rent to own means that you start with a rental over a particular period, and after a while, having accumulated a down payment, the rent becomes a mortgage. We have many Jamaicans out there paying $70,000, $80,000 for rent and have no possibility of owning. In fact, that rent is a deterrent to owning because there's no ability to save so as to own. And so the People's National Party is saying that when you look at a helper who might not have a payslip, the renter will just show a trend of payment, and that trend of payment will lead to greater confidence into transferring it into a mortgage. The same for security guards who may have low income, but is showing the partner or doing another hustle on the side without any evidence of earning. And so the rent to own is going to change this nation and will create great demand on the side of these 130,000 houses that the NHT will guarantee purchase. In fact, it is estimated that there's 700,000 persons in need of a home. And so 130,000 is just a small drop in the bucket.
Paul, housing is very important to the Jamaican people. How do you rate the People's National Party's rent-to-own program Mr. Crawford just explained?
It seems to me, as somebody who did a first degree in economics, that there's going to be some costing associated with this. What I do not like about it, though, is the fact that we're switching over into a socially sort of thing in terms of looking at this issue relating to public good. And instead of actually having the market determine these things, what I'm seeing here is that the People's National Party government would actually go back to a situation where the government is actually providing houses, and I'm wondering, where will this money come from? Because it is going to have to come from somewhere, particularly within the context that we're doing a market economy, and we seem to be going back to socialism or some construct of that sort.
Well, the government is not providing houses for free. The government is providing houses for purchase. Indeed, the NHT has long been providing houses for purchase. From the time of Michael Manley, the NHT has been providing houses for purchase, and that is from the early 70s. And so therefore, the government is only expanding the number of houses available within a particular demographic, with a particular income bracket for purchase. Indeed, it is the market that is determining this The market is determining this consumption because the prior high income market is now either afraid to purchase based on risk or incapable to purchase based on having lost their jobs. And so we are diverting or assisting suppliers of housing who will then go into the low income housing market and will give inducements to those activities to ensure that we have more houses for our people.
Mr. Crawford, shifting from housing to youth, what plans are in the manifesto to target this demographic?
Oh, a multiplicity of plans. The People's National Party, first of all, is reserving 35,000 homes as starter homes for persons under 35. But we also have a program that we find to be very ingenious in that we're going to be doing a grants remuneration program. And that means that we have ring-fenced $2 billion to pay 10% of the value of a grant that an individual receives. And so we're targeting persons who are underemployed, university graduates who are not actually working, to say, you go there and find grants on behalf of the society, find grants on behalf of your community, find grants on behalf of your interest area. And whatever grants you are successful in finding, you will be paid by the government 10% of the value of the grant. What this means is that this $2 billion can generate up to $20 billion in grant finding if it is successful and functional. We're also looking at another grant for youth entrepreneurs, as we're targeting 30,000 new entrepreneurs as it relates to the new Jamaica. And that is to give a 1-year grant of a income. And that income may be 40,000 per month, etc., so that you can go and fully engage into the business opportunity that you are pursuing once it is approved and by the JBDC or any other entity. So one of the hindrances of entrepreneurship is many persons are incapable or afraid to leave their jobs because of the need of an income. And so instead of giving you a grant to say, oh, here's a grant to do the startup, we're giving you a grant to actually go and put in your physical effort, put in your mental effort, and concentrate totally and carrying it from idea to business.
Paul, your assessment of the plans the PNP just outlined as per Mr. Crawford's statements a while ago, your assessment?
Well, as I mentioned before, the whole construct of what is going on here inside the PNP Manifesto to me is going to be highly cost. And I'm wondering how are they going to actually do a number of these things? Because when you look at it, there's going to be initial costing associated with this, except they're saying to me and to the Jamaican people that will be shifting resources from some areas into other areas. And if that is the case, then I can understand. Even with a grant, there's going to be someone that's going to be needed to assist in terms of putting up, and they must understand that a part of this cost must be forwarded by a government or some entity or somebody. Now, I understand the purpose and I sort of see all of that, but to me, this seems to be a costing dilemma that will hit us if it is to unfold come after, if they were to win in September 3.
Well, fortunately, the PNP National Party will be distributing our costing of these items, because what we have done is to identify 30% of discretionary spending within the budget for our priority areas. The discretionary spending is the spending afforded by the government after paying the wages and salaries and after paying the debt. And that is about 300 million. So 30% of that is about $90 billion. And so what our summation of priority items has been put forward in the manifesto is below 30% of the discretionary spending. I think that is reasonable case to say it's affordable, because the amount that is desired is 1/3 or less than 1/3 of the amount that is available.
Mr. Crawford, how confident are you about the plans you've outlined so far? And will it be sufficient to convince the undecided youths to vote for the PNP come September 3?
Well, there's no other plan out there for comparison. And by extension, the youth only have one plan to look at. And that plan is the People's National Party plan. We're very confident in the plans because they have been targeted directly to the people. I think this is the first manifesto that has been directed to the people and not an academic effort to say what ministries will do, but more so what we'll be doing for the people. I see where we're giving the teachers, for example, $100,000 to do COVID preparation, because that is going to be a need. You're going to have teachers who will have to have a private space so that their own children are not playing in the background. You're going to have teachers who have to buy a more comfortable chair because they're going to be sitting around the computer for much longer periods. In fact, I myself only use my computer in the bed. If I was to be doing homeschooling, I couldn't be using my computer in the bed. And so that 100...
Be experiencing some technical difficulties with Mr. Crawford's audio. So we will resolve that, but still continuing. Earlier today, we spoke with Jamaica Labour Party candidate for South St. James, Homer Davis, who outlined the plans he has for the constituency if elected the next member of parliament.
I am Homer Davis, your next member of parliament for the constituency of St. James Southern. A part of my vision for that constituency is to focus on the whole question of water. This is a constituency that has been starved for potable water for over the past 20 years, of which very little is easily obtained in the constituency. In today's day and age, water is life, and people have to be going to various areas, springs and gullies at times to collect water to do their own domestic chores. Most of the constituencies don't have running water in their homes, and that is something that will be very, very high on my agenda, to make sure that the constituency is supplied with a reliable potable water system. As it relates to the road infrastructure, I mean that is priority, because most of the roads in southern St. James, especially in the Catadupa division, they are all in a very deplorable condition. If you try to traverse from, for example, Short to Catadupa, the road is horrible. If you travel on Bottom Cambridge Road, travel on Duckett's Road. All these roads are in a very terrible condition. And these are priority areas that I will be focusing on. There's a piece of road from Moko to Garlands that in itself is fast becoming impossible to travel on. From Marchmont Road up to Washput Gully, that in itself is in a terrible state. So those are areas that are very high on my agenda. As it relates to the farmers, I intend to pay special attention to the farmers because the farmers need help. There's no doubt that the farmers need help. And if the farmers are the lifeblood of our economy, then I will have to make special effort to make sure that the farmers produce and produce in a very efficient and a very profitable way.
Mr. Davis further outlined plans for education.
As it relates to education, I will continue to expand my own education program by assisting not only primary and high school, but also assist tertiary students to attend the various institutions. As it relates to security is very high on my agenda because I think that as Jamaican people, we should live in peace. As it relates to job creation, the constituency is really a farming constituency, and this is a constituency that primarily relies on farming, but there are several young men and young women who have been leaving high school who really don't have any form of training whatsoever. So I intend to utilize all these 17 primary and high school classrooms to make sure that we have the necessary government agency coming in to train all these persons to make them employable, because it's one thing when someone looking at it is in need of a job, but if they don't have the requisite training, then it might be just difficult for them to get a job.
Mr. Davis also expressed that rural areas of St. James need special attention, and he will offer just that.
In my first term in office, if I'm able to achieve even 50% of what needs to be done at this time in the constituency, I would think that I would be way ahead of the game. Because South St. James, I don't know if it's because it's in the rural parts why persons don't really, make a special effort to get things done up there, right? But I'm a rural man myself, and I'm prepared to spend some time in the constituency to make sure that the lives of the people are more comfortable, the lives of the people are more secure, the lives of the people, they can go about their business without having to endure miles and miles of bad roads. Persons coming from work at night must have access to potable water. There can be no society, there can be no prosperity in any society without having the basic necessities. And I can give the commitment that my Prime Minister and the leader of the Jamaica Labour Party has committed to me that, Omar, based on what I see in your constituency, I have to make a special effort to give you the resources that you can bring this constituency up to a stage that the people can be proud that the Jamaica Labour Party is working and will be working in their best interest. And for that, I said to the Prime Minister, I'm going to work very hard, as I'm doing now, to make sure that we secure Southern St. James for the Jamaica Labour Party in the next general election, come September the 3rd. Vote JLP, vote Homer Davis, your candidate and next member of Parliament.
Paul Homer Davis, he's the current mayor of Montego Bay and now contesting the seat to become member of Parliament. Will his work as mayor impact his chances of being elected?
Very good question. I'm not sure it will. Now, when you are in leadership, irrespective of the level of leadership that you are at, it all comes down to your contribution at the time. And when you step up into another position, as in the case with Mr. Davis, what he did before as a mayor does not count anymore. It will be what he does as a caretaker that will actually count, and will people see him as a viable and good alternative in terms of him being willing to defend their interests and promote their interests. Now, in terms of this seat, the seat is a difficult one, and I'm not sure how I'm going to call this one. This one to me can go anyway, but I'm not seeing any substantial support for Mr. Davis, given that he is the mayor and would have been in leadership for some time with the people there on the ground.
Mr. Crawford, before we go, I want to ask you this final question. What makes the PNP Manifesto the People's Manifesto?
In the society, the teachers, the nurses, the police. The People's National Party Manifesto is suggesting that 10,000 young people attending the university will receive a scholarship of $350,000. That's $3.5 billion, less than half of the national budget, to attend the university for free. And that will create 1 degree per household, so that person can be the catalyst of change and the engine of growth within their community, within their family, and within this nation. I believe that this manifesto will change the society for a very, very long time in a very, very good way. And therefore, the People's National Party's manifesto is back to the People's Manifesto.
Paul, what would be your advice to the PNP going into the September 3 polls?
Well, the PNP has to get its act together. Now, it seems that there's a groundswell happening for the People's National Party, and this has to spell good for them. However, this manifesto that is actually chaired by Damien, I think it's a conceptual ideology that is unlikely to materialize, because too much concept is there without much thought as to how we're going to actually do it within a constricted environment, particularly in terms of a constricted environment as a result of COVID. And I'm saying the PNP needs to look at some of these things to try to understand, is it likely to accommodate and get all these things off the ground within a constricted environment?
I look forward to having this conversation
Crawford,
again when we present the costing of all these items next week.
All right, I want to remind viewers that this is the station, Mello TV, for your full coverage of election and national debates. I want to thank this evening our guest, political analyst and acting director of our institutional research at Northern Caribbean University, Paul Bourne, and vice president of the People's National Party, Damien Crawford. I'm your host, Nicole Hayles. Thanks for watching.